I'm going to read poems from my new book. It's a book called Epistles. These are prose poems. They are based loosely on the epistles of the New Testament, but I think if you know them, the New Testament epistles, you'll see how mine are different, or you'll hear how mine are different. I have two epigraphs to the book that I like to read before I read from it. One is from Hebrews. I think this is my favorite scripture in the Bible. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And these letters, in a sense, are attempts to collect evidence for things not seen. And the last line of a poem by Robert Frost, a poem called The Census Taker, which is one of his dramatic monologues in the voice of a man who goes about New England counting the dwindling numbers in villages in the area and noticing how every year there are fewer and fewer people. The last line of this poem reads, "It must be I want life to go on living." And the first poem I'm going to read you is an acknowledgement of Paul. It's called If I Were Paul. Consider how you were made. Consider the loving geometry that sketched your bones, the passionate symmetry that sewed flesh to your skeleton, and the cloudy zenith whence your soul descended in shimmering rivulets across pure granite to pour as a single braided stream into the skull's cup. Consider the first time you conceived of justice, engendered mercy, brought parity into being, coaxed liberty like a marten from its den to uncoil its limber spine in a sunny clearing, how you understood the inheritance of first principles, the legacy of noble thought, and built a city like a forest in the forest, and erected temples like thunderheads. Consider, as if it were penicillin or the speed of light, the discovery of another's hands, his oval field of vision, her muscular back and hips, his nerve-jarred neck and shoulders, her bleeding gums and dry elbows and knees, his baldness and cauterized skin cancers, her lucid and forgiving gaze, his healing touch, her mind like a prairie. Consider the first knowledge of otherness, how it felt. Consider what you were meant to be in the egg, in your parents' arms, under a sky full of stars. Now imagine what I have to say when I learn of your enterprising viciousness, the discipline with which one of you turns another into a robot, or a parasite, or a maniac, or a body strapped to a chair. Imagine what I have to say. Do the impossible. Restore life to those you have killed, wholeness to those you have maimed, goodness to what you have poisoned, trust to those you have betrayed. Bless each other with the heart and soul, the hand and eye, the head and foot, the lips, tongue and teeth, the inner ear and the outer ear, the flesh and spirit, the brain and bowels, the blood and lymph, the heel and toe, the muscle and bone, the waist and hips, the chest and shoulders, the whole body, clothed and naked, young and old, aging and growing up. I send you this not knowing if you will receive it, or if having received it, you will read it, or if having read it, you will know that it contains my blessing. This one is called I Have Lost My Explanation. I have lost my explanation for the divine plan. The vehicle for my metaphor was either the depths of pi, or it was the trajectory of DNA. I think something about the existence of numbers going on infinitely backwards reassured me, but how from that do I extrapolate love? Mathematics calls across distances, the angels are sines and cosines, and so on. But can heaven choose between one and many? There is no warmth in knowing God's guts are a string of irrational numbers. And I know that the very way we die, that is, the way we grow old and die, is buried in us. Even in the child who dies, the old woman or man is buried, never to be born, but waiting. And I think that shows, but I can't unpick the knot there either. I don't want to explain it all in terms of the family again, how the parents create and love their creation, and that is godlike, and how the children disappoint them, and that is human, and the parents punish, and that is godlike. Or how the parents withdraw, also godlike, and the children leave and make their own lives, and their parents recede in daily importance and any importance. Or how the parents die, shattering their children, who begin to think they were made by an absence. Or the parents divorce, belying their love, and shame permeates their creation like an element of the air, the oxygen that lights a match and lets us breathe. As its nucleus explodes, as it must eventually explode, and its particles carom and conjoin, a family's breakdown imitates a random plan, and not the one that I am trying to remember how to explain. I've lost my explanation. But I know someone who has proved the universe is digital, programmed by some divine hand, and a mind which, like a rainforest, is burning. Our interface is smoke, shaped and lit to look like fingers of a glove, columns of a flooded city, eroded buttes, pipe organs, something we know. And because of that, our knowing, something we do not know. Several years ago, I was at school where I teach to pick up my youngest daughter, who was at an orchestra rehearsal. And I was sitting in the audience with the other parents waiting, and the school paper had a little article about a contest for which I was a finalist. And the man, when the rehearsal finished, the man sitting in front of me got up and pointed to the paper and said, pointed at the article and said, "Is this you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, one has a party, one has a funeral." And I said to my daughter afterwards, I said, "So-and-so said this, that man." She said, "Oh yeah." Well, she said, "Well, that's Mr. Applebaum, he talks that way." So on the drive home, we tried to make up similar proverbs. One was, one pets the cat, one puts on a wet bathing suit. That was mine. This was my daughter's. One gets the letter bomb, one lives by himself in the woods. So this is, one of the things that goes on in this book is that it tries to think about the conflict between the single soul, the community of souls, the self, the communal and social, and the friction between these. So this is called One Wants, the Other Wants. One wants, the other wants. One wants to describe the plots of novels, the other wants to eat dinner. One wants to list the steps for assembly, the other shouts at the racket outside. One wants to pray, the other plans the week's menu. One says, "Just a minute." One says, "You haven't heard a single thing I've said." One gives thanks for the accident, for letting things fall as they fall, for life on life's terms. One has a party, one has a funeral. One pets the cat, one puts on a wet bathing suit. One gets the letter bomb, one lives by himself in the woods. One rages at intellect, one rages at poverty, one rages at the silence of heaven. And there one is, in a stocky young woman with hair down her back, in tight clothes, crossing the street, her chin lifted to defy the traffic. There in a teacher, speaking rudely to an eager student enjoying her little power. There the men on break, weary at 11 a.m., working beside the English department mansion, their surnames stitched on their uniforms. One wants to be singled out. The way a knife will not fully separate a shaft of green onion or stalk of celery it has chopped, that is how one remains attached. The way blinding tears come mincing yellow onions, that is how knowledge of others blurs. The tedious unpeeling of garlic cloves, especially the finicky thin ones near the heart of the bulb with purple highlights running through the wrapping and skin, that is how the many in here clustered. But one wants to be singled out, unsheathed from the smother of community, a slim, spiral-form marble word. That word is your name. There is in each of us an agent that refuses to die. It makes us, it is driven to form us, and has no idea who we are. Zapped by the ultimate fire blast, it will shift shape and endure. Lodged eventually in a crevice of the dead planet, it will wait millennia for rain. One loves another, one loves himself. One strides through the color wheel naked with arms outstretched. One crouches drawing diagrams on the bottom of the ocean floor. One worries that his heart is going off like a week-old carton of milk. One that love is leaking away through some hair-fine crack. And the best things about living, good food and family togetherness, joyful sex, the growing beauty of children, hope for tomorrow, all these will be lost. Any pleasures that might replace them, unthinkable. Returning to God, we will forget whom we loved. One thinks so. One hopes not. This book is dedicated to a dear friend of mine, a poet who, in letters, gave me many of the lines that appear in the book. And this short poem, Despite the Ash in the Air, is based almost entirely on a letter that she wrote to me. Her name is Terry Whittick. Despite the ash in the air. Despite the ash in the air, the smoldering underbrush up to the edge of the highway, the lifeguards working the beach in cotton surgical masks, it's not the end of the world. Despite the child building his pipe bomb, the parents in their startled postures lying in different parts of the house, the animals waiting their turn, it's not the end of the world. Despite the exile from your neighborhood, the place you have found to sleep rolled in wet sheets of plastic, it's not the end of the world. Despite the Valley of Kings submerged, the pristine moon polluted the sky, a junkyard of orbiting debris, it's not the end of the world. Despite the lesion that dims the eyesight and the tremor that stills with the day's first drink, it's not the end of the world. New houses are going up along the fault line. Orderlies make a ruckus round the clock on the corridor. We eat and sleep, though no longer together. So what is the end of the world? The eyesight smudged, the pipe bomb taped to the animal, ash filling the air in the Valley of Kings, the lifeguards, afraid for their lives. After you write a number of these, you have to ask forgiveness. And I'm going to end by asking forgiveness. This is called Forgive Me, Lord. Recently, I learned that God no longer delighted in my existence. He had grown homesick for the child I was, and regarded the balding, graying, overweight, 5'9", middle-aged man with some disenchantment. His heart did not dance to see me dress myself. His bowels turned cold as I drank my morning coffee. I heard that, contented as I was with myself, my daily habits of work, exercise, leisure, and sleep, he believed I should be dissatisfied as he was. Despite the years it had taken for me to become myself, The scarred face I shaved without cutting, he wished I had become someone else, or had never become. Had stayed the plump, unself-conscious boy of 3, standing between his father's crouching legs, encircled by arms on the front lawn beside the sprinkler head, snapped in black and white in a glow of summer. I understood the words repeated to me, but found it hard to choke down the question, who needs him? He must have heard the prayer I made to the windstorm that sheared oaks 1 block over. He must have seen me refuse to answer the phone when Mother called. Read what I wrote about his favorite poet, the one who copied verses verbatim from the Bible. Tasted the bile in my throat when one he adored spoke my name. Singed his fingertips on the dry ice where I stored my grudges, riffling through them, looking for the one that carried his name. So his message came, and I laid it up in my heart. Which of us now is obliged to forgive? Now I am brooding over abstract states. It is that time of year the onion grass sprouts among yellow winter blades. The remaining oak leaves stir about. The exposed earth at the base of trees shows damply. A fresh gust raises dead leaves randomly by one corner to make sure they are dead, or like bandages, checking for violets, and drops them down again, hinged on a crisp edge. And yet, one leaf will lose its grip and go tumbling, and others around seem to look after it. It is nearing the time when one said to the dogwood where he was nailed, I know you pity me. Never again will you grow like the oak and provide lumber for executions. You will be slender, and your blossoms, too long and too short petals, will form a cross. At the tip of each petal, a wound where the nail bit, rusty with blood. At the heart of each flower, a crown of thorns. In this transformation, remembering me, you will be forgiven. A curse alters only the one who utters it. But something passes between the forgiver and the forgiven that changes them both. One opens the injured eyelid and sees the wound has healed, and the other feels lighter, as when the pod unlocks and the plumed seed learns it flies. Thank you very much.
I'm going to do a sonnet. Mark didn't read any sonnets tonight, but he's written a lot of great sonnets, so I thought I would start with that, with a sonnet from my last book of poems, and then read some new stuff. Stolen moments. What happened once. So now it's best in memory. An orange he sliced, the skin unbroken, then the knife, the chilled wedge lifted to my mouth, his mouth, the thin membrane between us, the exquisite orange, tongue, orange, my nakedness and his, the way he pushed me up against the fridge. Now I get to feel his hands again, the kiss that didn't last but sent some neural twin flashing wildly through the cortex. Love's merciless, the way it travels in and keeps emitting light. Beside the stove, we ate an orange, and there were purple flowers on the table, and we still had ours. And so this is some new stuff. I have a book coming out next year called Lucifer at the Starlight, so I'm going to read a few poems from that. This first one has a lot of exclamation points in it, so you hear sort of a when that happens. And there are a lot of names in it also. Most of them will be familiar to you, but there are some place names in the middle, some Middle Eastern place names, and after that you'll hear some names, and they are women's names. Might be useful to know. This is November 11th, 2004. Oh, everyone's dead, and the rain today is marvelous. I drive to the gym, the streets are slick, everyone's using their wipers, people are walking with their shoulders hunched, wearing hoods or holding up umbrellas. Of course, it's all to be expected. Fantastic. My mother's friend Annie, her funeral's today. The writer Iris Chang, she just shot herself. And Arafat, he's dead too. The doctors refuse to say what killed him. His wife is fighting with the Palestinians over his millions. The parking lot of the gym is filled with muddy puddles. I run 4.3 miles per hour on the treadmill, and they're dead in Baghdad and Fallujah, Mosul and Samarra and Latakia. Nadia and Soraya, Nala and Hoda and Noor, their husbands and cousins and brothers, dead in their own neighborhoods. Imagine! Marine Staff Sergeant David G. Reese, 29, Clark, Washington, killed. Army Specialist Kwok Bin Tran, 26, Mission Viejo, California, killed. Army Specialist Brian L. Freeman, 31, Lumberton, New Jersey, same deal. Marine Lance Corporal Jeffrey Lauren, 22, New York. You guessed it. Oh, I could go on and on for as long as I live. In Africa, too, they've been starved and macheted. The morning paper said the Serbs apologized for Srebrenica. 7,800 Muslims murdered in 1995. I know it's old news, but hey, they're still dead. I almost forgot my neighbor's niece, 16 and puking in Kaiser Emergency, the cause a big mystery until the autopsy, toxic shock syndrome of all things. I thought that was history too, but I guess girls are still dying. Who knew? I run for 2 miles, my knees hurt, and my shins. I step off and stretch for a bit. I go back outside into the rain. It feels chilly and good. It goes on all day, unending and glorious, falling and filling the roof gutters, flooding the low-lying roads. And this one happens to have a few question marks in it. It's called Yes. So you can make little check marks if you like. You can take this test. Do you sometimes drink alone? Have you ever woken up the next morning after a night of heavy drinking? Does your cat wander through the house meowing inconsolably despite having fresh food and water? Hunger, thirst, friendship, love. Green bee, Russian quaalude, red-headed slut, IEDs on the supply route to pleasure. There's a gala in your hypothalamus, helium balloons rising to the rafters, the fizzy ricochet of laughter. There's a stumble bum in your cerebellum, that empty feeling crawling toward you. Should you kill it with a wadded paper towel, or trap it in a jar and shake it out and send it flying into the grass? Is your head full of frozen tamales and a vodka bottle curled on its side? How do you get through the interminable evenings? Are they really interminable? Have you considered the alternative? Now get out of your car, stand by the side of the road and take a step. Now recite the wasteland backwards, beginning with that sexy Sanskrit word, which is Shanti, peace. This is called The Little Dog Upstairs That Never Quits Barking. The poem doesn't have a happy ending, but the story does, because the little dog died, I'm happy to say. I heard this woman upstairs, my dog died, and I was just thinking, before I got a chance to poison it. The little dog upstairs that never quits barking has suddenly quit. And in the quiet, I wait for him to resume, imagining him, for I have seen him, his tight white curls, his anxious, mashed-in face, staring into space, too sorrowful now even to cry out, settling with a sigh in the leopard armchair, facing the wooden indifference of the door. Poetry, after all, is a form of barking. Yap, yap, yap. Someone please come back. Take me outside to piddle among the flower stalks. Cradle me in the arms of your strange tall species. Grant me a biscuit shaped like a bone. And now I too fall silent. The clock in the kitchen keeps clicking away, saying love me to the skillet and saucepans, the wire rack of dishes, cans of soup and beans, oh bowl of sugar, oh dispenser of salt. This is called Storm Catechism. I grew up Catholic, so we grew up with the Baltimore Catechism that had the hard questions and the answers. So who made man? God made man. Why did God make man? To love, honor, and serve him. So there are a few questions in here as well about those sorts of matters. Storm Catechism. The gods are rinsing their just boiled pasta in a colander, which is why it is humid and fitfully raining down here in the steel sink of mortal life. Sometimes you can smell the truffle oil and hear the ambrosia being knocked back. Sometimes you catch a drift of laughter in that thunder crack. Zeus knocking over his glass, spilling lightning into a tree. The tree shears away from itself and falls on a car, killing a high school girl. Or maybe it just crashes down on a few trash cans and the next day gets cut up and hauled away by the city. Either way, hilarity. The gods are infinitely perfect, as is their divine mac and cheese. Where does macaroni come from? Where does matter? Why does the cat act autistic when called, then batter a moth for an hour, watching intently as it drags its wings over the area rug? The gods were here first, and they're bigger. They always were and always will be living it up in their father's mansion. You only crawled from the drain a few millennia ago, after inventing legs for yourself so you could stand, inventing fists in order to raise them and curse the heavens. Do the gods see us? Will the waters be rising soon? The waters will be rising soon. Find someone or something to cling to. You can see my cat inspires my poetry often. This is a little bit inspired by other poems. So there are those of you who like such exercises can see how many twisted lines of other poets you can find in this piece. But I'll tell you, it begins with a take on a Frost line, I've been more acquainted with the night, and it ends with Frost also. And there are a few more lines in the middle that have been torqued. The first line is the deepest. I have been one acquainted with the spatula, the slotted, scuffed, Teflon-coated spatula that lifts a solitary hamburger from pan to plate, acquainted with the vibrator known as the pocket rocket, and the dildo that goes by Tex. And I have gone out a drunken bitch in order to ruin what love I was given. And also I have measured out my life in little pills, Zoloft, Restoril, Celexa, Xanax. I have, for I am a poet, and it is my duty to know wherein lies the beauty of this degraded body, or maybe it's the degradation in the beautiful body, the ugly me groping back to my desk to piss on perfection, to lay my kiss of mortal confusion upon the mouth of infinite wisdom. My kiss says razors and pain. My kiss says America is charged with the madness of God. Sundays, too, the soldiers get up early and put on their fatigues in the blue-black day, black milk, black gold, Texas tea. Into the valley of Halliburton rides the infantry. Why does 1 month have to be the cruelest? Can't they all be equally cruel? I have seen the best gamers of your generation joysticking their M1 tanks through the sewage-filled streets. Whose world this is, I think I know. This is called God Ode. And this is from an anthology that Chad Prevost, is Chad here? Yeah, so a couple guys are doing this anthology called, is it Breathe? Yeah. Breathe, 101 Contemporary Odes. So this is mine, it's called God Ode. Praise having a body to be unhappy in, suffering the slings and staring unbelieving at the arrows bristling from your chest as the Indians creep closer. Praise the oil slick of your loneliness, the suffocated little shorebirds of your longing. Here's to the scribbles of alcohol seeping into the cell walls, the reeling mitochondria, the deceased brain cells carried out in coffinets of sweat. Gratitude, gratitude to whoever knelt down and shat upon the floor of the portalette at the children's playground where I had to pee last Sunday after pushing my young friend on the tire swing, after whumping down the curving tube slide again and again upside down on my back. Small happiness followed by nausea. Thank you, you demented, you disapproving or possibly AWOL higher power. How high is that anyway? Higher than me and my grown-up friend doing ecstasy in the desert, getting cut up by cactus, floating back to the house, finding water for once more delicious than wine. Praise you in your airy, your maybe not there crag. Down here on the darkling, fattening plain, we root and toil, and sometimes, mercifully, we spin. So this is called Shrine. Our Lady of Dejection, goddess of sleeplessness and dread, of owl shriek, of the old man next door hawking up phlegm, his rasp and spit, his heavy sigh, Our Lady of isolate evenings spent sifting for coins in the shipwreck at the bottom of a bottle, Lady of the perforated heart, of errands looming like the labors of Hercules, Lady of consoling, tormenting memories unstoppered from the soul jar and spilled shimmering in answer to unanswerable thirst, I love your downcast eyes, your outstretched hands, your alcove of foglight descending from the stratosphere. I love how you forbear us, how you force our pain to flowering, unlike God who has forsaken us in favor of those who praise him. For I cannot praise him with my awful strings, with my terrible song, Lady of wind in the yards, tearing down trees in the dark, Lady of sulphurous rain and washed out roads and snapped power lines flailing and sparking. Oh, my mother, at your lovely feet I lay my bitter offering. So presumably that's brought us all down a little bit and gives me an excuse to segue into some blues. I realize this is the poetry hour, technically. There's my pun. Haha, get it? And I realize this is not the poetry and roots music hour, but I play blues harmonica, and I think there are, or I'm learning blues harmonica, and I think there are a lot of intersections between this music and poetry. So I like to try to play a little blues for poetry audiences. So I'm going to play you two short things. I think I have enough time. Two short pieces, and the first one is a train song. All aboard. So that's a little train song, thank you. Thanks. And the last thing I'm going to do is I meant to say that was a kind of my take on a couple of different train songs by DeFord Bailey, who was actually the first African American to play at the Grand Ole Opry. It's very popular there. And so that was DeFord, a little bit of a couple of his train songs called Dixie Flyer Blues and Panamanian, Panamanian double blues, no, Pan American blues, and this last piece is one that was recorded by the Lomaxes, of a guy named Turner Jr. Johnson, a little spiritual called In New Jerusalem. There's a bright my mother is. Thank you. Thanks.
This one's called Kiss Grandma Goodnight. The old ones smell funny. They don't smell of gum, pie, or pink candy, but gardenia and mum. They smell of white flowers, huge dying flowers, and sometimes gin, which kills the long hours. They insist that you kiss their sunken gray lips before they hand over licorice whips. They'll sulk all alone and guzzle cheap gin or talk to dead husbands to feel loved again. But pucker and kiss them, act like a chum, lie that you love them, they're what you'll become. And in my family, we always had to do prayers every night before we went to bed, and then we would have to bless everybody whether you wanted to or not. Prayer before bed. Of course I pray for Mommy's health. She fixes every meal. I bless my sister, Mom insists, although sometimes I conceal an off-the-record prayer inside the prayer my parents hear, that sister get a chronic rash. Well, chronic and severe. But most of all, I pray that God keep Daddy safe and well, that all the charges be dismissed, and that his used cars sell. Make Daddy confident and glib, and keep his handshake firm, so when it's time to close the deal, the suckers never squirm. Lord, keep his commissions high, so I won't have to kneel with nose to grindstone, ear to ground, and shoulder to the wheel. I couldn't work in that stance, Lord, or polish pitted chrome. As much as I love bacon, Lord, let Daddy bring it home. And then I think we've all, as kids, had sexual crushes. And this is a boy that has a crush on Rebecca Kotzwinkle, whose name he can't quite pronounce because of his speech impediment. But he dreams of playing house with Rebecca, and the poem is called Playing Houth. I loved playing houth with Rebecca Kotzwinkle. Thee first let me kith her, then pushed me away. I begged, she said no, and then she said maybe. I rubbed up against her and started to sway. I pulled up her third, and she puffed it down. Up, down went the third. Then down plunged her panties, and up flew her bra, and off went my thooth, my thock, and my third. I never thought my sweetie'd agree. My penis thriveled to the size of a snail. Oh, Becky, please, please suck my penis. She laughed so hard, she couldn't exhale. The more I said it, the harder she snickered. My penis won't hurt you. Oh, Becky, I promise. But Rebecca Cotswinkle was done playing house and left me consoling a sullen John Thomas. Enough of that project. I'm hoping to be banned by libraries. The entertainment part of the evening is now over. This is a poem called My Daughter. After midnight, I dragged carpet padding from a trash bin and spread it on the asphalt between the wall and dumpster. Screened from sleet, I pulled carpet fragments over me, and that night I married, raised a family, and outlived everyone except a daughter, a teacher, and her 2 children, one damaged. I woke when a bread truck scraped the bin. From under damp carpet, I watched punctilious men sign invoices, sweep, hose down the docks. A boy in a bloody butcher's smock leaned against the wall and smoked through bloody fingers. At night, I search and sometimes find my daughter. I make good money now, I tell her. Let me take Teresa home with me. I can buy the help she needs. My daughter smiles, asks how I'm doing, and I lose the moment to my wife, my job, my actual family. As the thick-faced infant bucks in her arms, or beats her forehead hard and almost musically against the table. When I clench her to my belly, she screams, red-faced and rigid. Hush, 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 I serenade her. Oh, unhushable baby, hush. Right after college, I taught school for a year, 6th grade, and then I killed myself. It was the reasonable response to doing it a second year. After teaching. Who at daddy, Joni sang when Benita rumbled up the aisle, a bull of a girl leaning forward, falling from step to step. Who it daddy? Who it daddy? And on the 3rd day, I saw, inside the larger swelling of Benita's swell, an ancient couple turning a corner in an ancient city and holding hands rise into twilight. They never fall, the old couples who rise elegantly into evening. No one finds them lying in wheat fields or draped over oaks like collapsed balloons. Romantics say they rise forever, but I believe they ascend so slowly they starve before they strangle in the thin air and then dissolve in heaven's nothing. When I quit teaching, I moved to that ancient city, and I ghosted there the autobiography of a great man, a fascist sympathizer, yes, but nothing more than that, he said. He loved willows, willows of all kinds. And while I was articulating that love, I drank his purple wine and slept on his lubricious sheets, saying I. I made a self for him, noble but flawed, briefly disoriented by boyish idealism, as I worked inside the green curtain of the willows my words for him taught me to love. The circus. The circus. Yes, the girl sneezing pink froth, and the woman fisting her eyes each time another oldie crackles from the ceiling look worse than I do. See them, and find please a dentist for the man clutching two molars in a bloody paper towel, and a CPA or lawyer. Summon one for the man squeezing the folder of gray paper to his chest and squeaking grievously. But I have an appointment. I arrived 2 hours ago, on time, a little early in fact, and someone must help me find the Ferris wheel I hear looping in my attic, and the tilt-a-whirl lopsidedly unfolding and refolding in the basement. Through the walls, I hear the pawing of a carousel, and in dark windows and the gleaming facades of black appliances, I glimpse ascending and descending carved horses, real tigers, elephants, and waltzing poodles. Whitewashed clowns ghost across a TV, humbling itself before beer, soap, laundry, and my armpits, muffling the human cannonball's applause and the dumbfounded wow when an orange torch enters a human face and emerges unquenched. The circus is not my fault or responsibility. Someone must write that down. Someone must sell me a ticket. That's a true story here. Pardon me? I don't have it. No, sorry. I read Stalin's Laughter instead. This is a true story, by the way. The Stalin's Laughter. At the secret policeman's feast, Parker, drunk, sagged between two officers as he aped Zinoviev, hiccuping hilariously and staggering over watery, risible feet as he was dragged to the firing post. A devotee of Momus, son of night, Josip Vissarionovich was, and Parker, knowing it, mouthed words he could not, in feigned panic, propel from his tongue, because dysphonia is always funny. The ratchet and catch of fractious breath, farcical. Parker fell prostrate as Zinoviev had fallen, and as Zinoviev had done, he clutched the boots of his mock guards and cried, "Please, for God's sake, comrade, call Josip Vissarionovich." And Josip Vissarionovich, evoked as savior, roared, basso buffo. Parker, as a jester must, pushed harder, raising his arms to the banquet hall's beamed ceiling, as Zinoviev had raised his to the fuliginous brown clouds crowded over the prison yard, and cried, "Hear, O Israel, our God is the only God." Josip Vissarionovich gagged on laughter, choked on ungovernable mirth. Tears trailed down his cheeks, almost onto the mustache, whose likeness, primarily metaphorical, to Blatella germanica, the German cockroach, paid Mandelstam's umbrageous passage to a common grave outside a transit camp. Stalin slashed his thick hand. Enough, enough. commanding mercy upon the festive executioners, laughing helplessly. I think it was 8 or 9 years ago, I had been reading Yeats's The Wild Swans at Cool over and over again. And I woke up one morning to hear on the radio that Gwendolyn Brooks had died. And so it occurred to me to wonder, what would happen if you wrote The Wild Swans Skip School after Brooks's most famous poem? The wild swans skip school. We beat wings, we fly rings, we scorn Yeats, we have mates, we won't stay, we fly away. I have time for one more poem. The time has sneaked up on me. This is a poem about a series of massacres, white settlers and Indians back and forth on the frontier. The frontier there being eastern Tennessee and North Alabama. And it's about one of the more famous massacres in early American history. The poem is called American Rendering. We massacred Fort Sims, 247 souls, if you count, as some did even then, blacks, Indians, and mestizos, all scalped, some tortured. And the females of every age were butchered in a manner neither decency nor seemliness of word permit me to describe. The last survivors huddled in a stronghouse, begging as they burned to curled and dirty cracklin, burned by us, the Red Stick Creeks of Alabama, just recompense for those of us they'd slaughtered. We rejoiced almost a month, and an answer fell on Tallusahatchee, where we now, as a company of whites from Tennessee, ambushed a Creek encampment. Maybe they were even Red Stick Creeks. We shot them like dogs, said Davy Crockett. They fled to a hut, groans, shrieks. We torched it. An Indian boy, 12 or thereabouts, his knees shattered by gunfire, clawed at the dirt in his last agonies. He lay so near the burning house, his grease stewed out of him, wrote Davy Crockett. We were famished, 3 months from home, and food, and living on parched corn. We dug up their hidden food, potatoes buried beneath the gutted hut, roasted in the inferno. Need forced us to the gray potatoes, though we had rather not. Oil had seeped down on them. They looked like they'd been stewed with fat. Gray potatoes, grease hardening. We gorged on food they'd saved, though all of us would rather not. At the Alamo, we heaved in his turn Crockett on the pyre, a layer of dry wood, a layer of Texans, mesquite, dead Texans. The drunk priest said a word, we lit the fire, and in just minutes, a scorched theriaca haloed the flames, the grease by which we render America. Thank you, and thank you all.
I wish I knew. I'd tell you. I mean, there are different definitions. Auden thought it was a poet who used the language in a new way, was in touch with the most progressive thought of his time and was willing to strike out in new directions. You know, the famous Jarrell definition of a poet is struck by lightning. 6 times he's good, 12 times he's great. The question is, well, how do you measure that lightning strike? I think, what is a great poet? I mean, a great poet has to have more than one great poem. You know, a great poet probably has to be someone who has a sense of his, as Yeats would call it, the voice of his folk and his people, and the way they speak their language. And Whitman is a great poet. Dickinson is a great poet. I think Frost is a great poet. Those are examples to me of greatness. Others will have others. But all of them have a sense of, for us, what it is to be an American at a certain time and speak this English that we speak. It's not a definition. I can only give one sort of inductively by examples.
What makes a poet great? I think it's what makes anybody great. Like what makes an actor great is authenticity. You believe it. So I think that a poet that knows about language is a language master, which is the best definition I ever heard of a poet. A master of language who also makes you believe that they are completely authentic and true, then I think that's a great poet.
I think that it's a combination. I mean, technical skills are just what buy you cards at the table. It's great skill, but it's also great subject matter, greatly engaged. And that's why, Shakespeare and Dante are so huge. And it's not just that they are technically great, but they deal with great subjects. But so do other people. So does Wallace Stevens. So does Louise Hook. So do, I don't even know where to even stop naming people, actually. Starting is no problem.
Who inspires me most for poetry? Oh, that's a profound question. I get inspiration from many different places. One of my inspirations for poetry is twofold. My father and my grandfather, both of whom are preachers, or my grandfather's dead, were preachers. Very, very good preachers. Men who had to get up every week in front of a group of people and translate the word to them. And that had a profound influence on my sense of rhythm and sense of what a poem should be. And so reflecting on their example has been something that has inspired me. But I get inspiration from lots of places. Being a kind of uprooted Californian, I live in Tennessee. I'm from Los Angeles. Thinking about the coastline of Southern California, that inspires me. My wife inspires me. She's a classical singer with a gorgeous voice. My children inspire me. I mean, you get it from many places, but I think the motivation to write poetry had something to do with wanting to repeat in some way what I grew up watching these men do. And knowing I wasn't called to the pulpit, as they say, but I got called to writing poetry. So I think that's maybe the fundamental thing.
Just about every poet I've ever read. Actually, lately I've been reading a lot of Dean Young, who's really great and comic and makes a lot of leaps in his work and seems to include everything about life. So I like him a lot right now.
I don't even know. A little bit of everything, what you read, what you see, what you hear talking about to other people, the whole experience, everything really.
12. I was 12. I wrote a poem, a ballad. I still know it. I will not torture you with it.
Oh, come on.
It's awful. But I wrote it for an English class. Had to write a poem. Took me about a week.
Can you tell us the title?
No, I can't remember the title. But it was a genuine ballad in common measure, And it was a completely absorbing experience. And I would work on it every day, and I'd think about it, and I'd say it in the shower, and it physically took me over, and there was such pleasure in doing it that I think I've been probably working on a poem ever since.
As far as I remember, I wrote in high school, but I think everybody writes in high school. So I really started writing seriously in my late 20s. I discovered some Sylvia Plath and got really excited by her work. And
I started writing in high school, I guess. I just, that famous line, I don't even know who said it, that a writer is a reader moved to emulation. And I was a reader all my life, and at some point, a little light bulb came on in my head. I said, I wonder if I could try to do this thing that I've spent so much time, reading.